back for another episode of the Maine State of Mind. I'm Justin Soderberg, your host. Today is another beer episode, back to back weeks of beer episode. When you live a life like mine, where you work in the beer industry, you tend to make friends and have a passion for beer. So this week and last week were both beer episodes, and we'll have a couple more coming up in the near future. But this week we talk a little bit more on the design side of the beer industry, where I welcome a good friend of mine and colleague at Mast Brewing Company, Parker Olen, one of the co-owners and VP of brand strategy. He has been designing for a number of years, and he does all their beer labels and basically anything that has anything to do with graphic design for Mast Landing. So we talk development of labels, development of names of beers, where the future of beer industry beer can designers going. Obviously, I do beer design for Orono Brewing Company as well, beer can design. So we talked about my industry, my work at Orono Brewing Company, and our collabs and so on. So this is a design podcast based around the beer industry with a good friend of mine, Parker Olen of Mast Landing Brewing Company in Westbrook, Maine. I really hope you guys enjoy. Again, I'm going to reiterate: like, subscribe, follow, do what you can to help promote the podcast. Give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube. I really appreciate it. I do this for me because I love doing it. I love talking, but I also enjoy all the comments I get from you guys, messages, emails, and so on. So I really, really, really appreciate everybody listening. Like, subscribe, follow. Enjoy this episode with Parker Olen from Mast Landing Brewing Company on beer can design and design in the beer industry in general. Enjoy, everybody. How's it going, Parker?
Good. How are you?
I'm
Good to
doing
see you.
wonderful. Yeah. I mean, we mentioned a little bit before we started recording that we don't work in a close proximity to each other. I mean, close compared to other breweries across the country, but we used to see each other a lot. We used to like almost every once a month at least, I would say, like at events and beer things and collabing and all that stuff. But I don't think I've been to another brewery since at least over a year ago, because of the fact of this pandemic that's going on. But it's good to see you on virtual, for sure.
Good to see you as well. Yeah, you used to stop by even when we didn't have stuff planned. Like your path kept coming up and through Westbrook and stopping by the brewery and dropping off some delicious beer. So glad that we can link up again, even if it's just virtual.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, let's be honest. If you worked for, a accounting firm, I don't know how many times I would have stopped by on the way through to say hi. I mean, even if you just worked at a design firm, it might have been
Right.
like hey, let's get a beer sometime. But when you work in the industry and you have other friends in the industry that you want to stop by, it's usually bring them some goodies, they give you some goodies, and we move on. Maybe if I'm going to Massachusetts, I'm always like, hey, I need some beer to bring to Massachusetts with me. But now that Mast Landing and Orono Brewing Company are in Massachusetts, a lot of times when I bring beer to people in Massachusetts, they're always like, "Oh, I can get you down the street now." I'm like, I'm giving you this beer. I don't know what you're talking about. This is free beer.
It
But
is funny. It is funny.
we're
I see you
actually,
have our
yeah,
collab right there.
we're actually
Uh,
collabing right now. Or actually, this one came out a couple weeks ago, and you're working on something over at Mast Landing. Mast Landing is in Westbrook, Maine, right outside Portland, if anybody doesn't know. And Parker here, I mentioned at the top that Parker does design for Mast Landing. It's, I guess, the biggest one of those things that when you work for a brewery that's not like a multinational brewery, whenever someone asks what we do for the brewery, it's usually everything, and then people are like, nah, that doesn't make any sense. And it's like, well, no, Parker does the design for Mast Landing, but I'm sure there's a number of other things there he's called in different directions, similar to what I do with Orono Brewing Company. That sometimes if you moved on from Mast Landing and you filled out a resume and you put all the duties you had in that resume, they probably would look fake. It looked like you're lying about what you do.
yeah, be like, you got it. Come on, bud. Like, you didn't do all of the, like, this is 15
Yes,
pages.
yes, and that's the thing. And so with the breweries, we all have titles, but in the same sense, like it's really whatever needs to be done, and that's what's
Right.
pretty cool about a brewery. And it's not even just for your brewery. I mean, if I had a question, hey, that I'm working on a design of a label, and it's something unique that I'm trying to do, I could easily phone Parker and be like, hey man, I know you've done it on a different label. What did you do to get this, to work this way? Or what printer did you use? Or what material did you print on? And Parker wouldn't go, no, this is a trade secret. He'd say, hey man, I went with this label company, or I did this, this
Well,
adhesive or whatever with whatever.
especially because I probably called someone prior to that and found out from someone else at a different brewery. So it's a lot of fun being able to have those connections and have people generally be happy to share information instead of like, holding those cards close to the chest.
And it's cool because we do collab on things like Salute Your Hops and the beer we're doing with you guys down at Mast Landing. But the truth of the matter is, collabing in the brewing industry is really collaboration as a whole, like we mentioned about asking questions and doing that. I swear, Parker, from what we see, Parker and Tom and Asa have Neil's phone number on speed dial for asking questions about canning line and things they're doing in the production. When we made our peanut butter beer, who do you think we called first? We called Mast Landing and asked questions about, we've never worked with this peanut butter flavoring. And so it's
Right.
like that collabing goes a long way. It may not say your name on every can, but the collaboration among breweries in the state of Maine or in the industry is everlasting. It's not just for a specific brew, which is pretty cool.
It's funny you say that. You brought up OBC, Parker, because on multiple occasions I've woken up to texts from Asa in the morning asking me when I was gonna be on the canning line or what I was scheduled to brew, and I first couple of times I was very confused, but now I just realized that I just say wrong Parker.
Yes, and it's the same. We had the same thing with me. The Craft Beer Guild's brand manager is Justin Frizzell. So I'll get text messages being like, hey, we're sending you 100 cases of tubular. And I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to put that at my house. I think you have the wrong person.
Or we already have it here.
And he's
we
like,
just gave it to you.
He's like, I'm like, can you just change his name to Frizzell on his phone? That's what he goes by anyway. It's like me. Smitty is on my phone as Smitty, not, his actual name. But back on the design thing, we did this collab. The funny thing about this collab is that, was one of the things I want to talk about is the idea of like how we go about as can designers. I want to get your input on this and like how you go about getting from concept into the actual label. But the funny thing is, I designed this label 2.5 years ago, and it's one of those ones that I was just tooling around. I was tooling around and been like, I really want to do this. And it was originally for the beer we did was Kablam. It was one of our first IPAs we made back in 2015, 2016. But it was more of a West Coast IPA, and we made it for a little bit, and it was like, one of the talks is like, let's re-release it, but as a New England style IPA and so on. So the label just sat dormant, and it didn't really have a name on it. It was just like, I had Kaplan, like basically probably in just Times New Roman, like just a laid out
placeholder. Yeah.
And Asa comes to me and goes, we're doing a collab with Mast Landing. And you know what? We could actually use that, like that Nickelodeon type theme label. And I was like, oh my God, because I've been wanting to use it forever. And then it becomes easier for me because I'm just like, okay, edit, tweak, and then done. But the funny thing is, we changed the design of our cans. I wish I had that, but we centered the hop more. It used to be off to the left a little bit. And so there was some edits that I needed to do to put it into the current format of our can design. So, but it's the same thing if you had something, because now Mast Landing's designs are pretty much, 90% of them are the same format.
Yeah, that was a long time coming. Took about 4 years to kind of figure out what direction we wanted, and I guess we can go down this path. It actually happened almost by mistake, where I did a design and it was never intentional to I never intended to have that be the kind of like the design for most of our labels. Anything that we're releasing that's not a collab, and with Gunner's Daughter we haven't brought over yet too. We're working on that one. That one's a process, but we are putting into kind of the rectangle with the words below. It was on Amsterdam, I think. Oh no, actually it was Inglenook. Actually, right. Yeah. You can't see this, but it was this one. I'd seen a long time ago some old farming poster, and and I really liked that, so I took a mental note of it, and then so I did it for that. Everyone really liked that style, and so we tried it again on Amsterdam, which was an amber ale, and then after like staring at them, on my desk for a long time, I was like, let me just see if I transfer a couple of our core beers over to this, and they looked really good. People got really excited about that, and then we made the jump. And especially where we're just distroing more beer, and we're in different states that people may not be as familiar with us and our designs. It's definitely helping to have that one orientation for all the labels, and then every now and then we do a fun one with a collab, and that I really like, and now I'm like looking forward to collabs even more, because then I get to kind of jump outside of that, where we put ourselves inside this kind of, no pun intended, like inside this box. And so it's fun to kind of get outside of that and get creative.
And it's fun because like it's not like you guys like you do, some of them are actual photos because it just becomes whatever works best. I mean, like Firelight Afterglow. Is that what
Or
it is?
Firelights Aglow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
love that one.
that one's cool because that one's a box, but you have the flames that go all around it. And that's the thing. It's like, but it's still like one of the things that I will say for most breweries, it's best. It's like, a Trillium can, a Treehouse can, a Sam Adams can, like, what the beer is based on what the style is or the can design is. And so it's nice that, I mean, I, as someone who looks at beer cans differently than someone who's just a consumer who just drinks it,
Right.
knew what your design was. It's not like our Parker mentioned with the collab that we did for the Maine Brewers Guild.
Yep.
It was funny. He goes, "That can's pretty sweet. It looks like a Mast Landing can." And I was like, that's awesome that you were able to pull that from it, because it really didn't have any like Mast Landing stamp on it. It wasn't like you had like the box. It wasn't something that you guys had traditionally looked like that. It just happened to be that your style and the way you design things triggered his thing. And it's the same thing with, when I taste a Mast Landing beer, I'm like, oh, that's a Mast Landing beer, because you guys have a brewing style and a way you make beer. And so it was really cool to hear him say that. And I was like, oh, that's because Parker from Mast Landing designed this label.
It was all part of my secret plan to have every other brewery promoting Mast Landing. No, I got that a couple times. Like, just I think that the kind of the minimalistic, shapes and styles on that, within the state. The funny thing with that, touching on that one, is when they asked me to do it. Originally, my plan was to do the state of Maine was going to be an area where each brewery could go in and do their own design. And so like it was, and I kind of just, I threw the landscape together. And then when I showed it to the board, they were like, we like this. And then I was like, well, that was just going to be like Mast Landings. And they were like, no, we want to use that for everyone. And I was like, that works for me. But yeah, so the intention was never to have it like that, but I think that it would have been a cool way, maybe in the next one. I know it was being the first one, they wanted to keep it, the first collaboration, they wanted to keep it a little simple. And so maybe next time we can have people be able to put their own artwork inside the state. I think that'd be a really cool, alteration.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those, it's going to be an evolving thing. I think it's one of those things that we did originally as a collab for like, okay, we have a year of a pandemic, we need to figure something out. But then it worked so well and it was so much fun and so unique that it was like, oh, the likelihood now is that it's going to continue. It's something we're going to do every year, which is really cool.
Right.
And it also helps. I mean, for you and me, it's like we have a lot on our plate. So it actually does help us in a sense too, that there's a beer that's going to come out that we don't have to do very much to that beer. We could just do a small edit, send it to the printer, and we're done with it too. So there's every once in a while, it's nice to have that quick little like, okay, couple of small changes and then move on to the next label, something that you're actually like working hard to get out there and stuff. But like the question I have, is it better or worse to not have to pick fonts every time you do a can?
So that's so funny. So that you say that, because I tend to now, like when I was saying when we do like a collab or something, I tend to focus more on the font because I haven't been using fonts. I could go either way. With our I don't have any one of the bottles over here, but our mix firm, our first mixed fermentation bottled beer on the Good Light, I chose what I'm going to do is keep that's going to be all font design. And so that will be fonts, that will be heavy text labels. And so it's kind of the opposite where there won't be a lot of imagery, but it'll be through the text. So that's how I'll get my my fill of that. But those beers are few and far between.
And it's funny because I actually speaking of the category of fonts, there is a thing where obviously you and I aren't physically going out there designing fonts. You're picking a font that works well with your design. And the funny thing is, I do a lot of the initial. So we come up with as an OBC, just to give you a little background on how we do things at our brewing company, and so people know, is that a lot of times it's like, okay, we're doing a beer of Mast Landing. We know what you guys like. We know what we like. We've done enough collabs that we can figure something out that we know we're going to both like. And then we talk about like what we would think the design should be. And then no one ever has a really idea of what the font should be. Like no one really has like an input.
That's not in the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a lot of times it's me. And then I find the font that I really like, but a lot of times they like to see a little different treatments of the stuff. So I'll throw in like the font I really like and two really bad fonts. So it's like, oh, that's gross. Oh, that one's gross. This one's the best. And I'm like, that's how I get my font that I want. But it backfired a little bit on, I forget which one it was. And I ended up changing it, but it backfired on a font that I was doing. And they all chose I know I did it with a color scheme. The last time we did our Every Little Thing beer, I did a color scheme that I did not like. And it was mainly to say, don't choose that one, choose this one. I got emails back from everybody, and it was all like, we love that other one. And I'm like, no, that's hideous. You can't do that. So I was able to
that's a designer trick.
Yes, I convinced them not to do it. Now they're looking for it because they know about it. But like, it was kind of funny. It gets tedious sometimes to pick the fonts because it's just like you like a couple of them and you can't choose between them. Then you find out you like a font, but it doesn't work very well on the design because the design clashes with the font and all that stuff. But it's funny that I had to like throw that in there because I wanted to make sure that I get the font that I want, or even design or color scheme that I want.
I used to do that when I worked at a ad agency in Portland, and same exact thing. The creative department created a rule. It said it was that never show a client, like, let's say they'd ask for 3 options in a poster. They're like, never show a client an option that you don't like because they'll pick the one that you think is the worst one. And so it's kind of like that. We'd had that same kind of font thing backfire enough that we're like, all right, so we make sure, like, if you're sending it to them, make sure that, like, even though you have your favorite, you got to make sure that the other ones are acceptable too, because the rule is they'll always pick the bad one. So
and so now that they know that I did that, and it's the color scheme one was when I was like, okay, guys, we do this collaboratively. We're a team here at the brewery. It's usually the 4 owners, myself, who make decisions on the design stuff. And I'm like, okay, guys, I'm putting my foot down on this one. I'll let it ride the next couple of times. If I'm leaning one way and everybody else is leaning the other way, I'll just give in. This color design aspect, I cannot let us do this. I cannot let this go further. I'm sorry. I don't want to put my stamp on this. I cannot do it. So finally we gave in. We changed something else. The next Every Little Thing that comes out is going to be the one that I picked. But it was just kind of funny. I was like, okay, now that backfired on me, I got to get a little better at this and be like, okay, guys, I really like this font, but here's some other options that could be passable because I can't do this.
I totally agree. I feel lucky here. It's gotten to the point where we have a second person in creative, our marketing director, Gene, who he thinks, being in creative together, I'm able to toss ideas off him, before having to show it to, like, people outside of creative. And it's very helpful to kind of get his opinion, and he can catch stuff or whatever, or help move something along when I'm stuck before I have to go out and show it to the untrained eye, for lack of a better term. But yeah.
But there's a reason why you're in that position and they're not, and that's not trying to be rude, but it's the same reason why you're not standing at the brew kettle, because you don't have that. You're not going to be like, no, we should definitely do this. Hop.
I'll give my opinion, but
it's like in the end, it's like you rely on the experts at that to do that. Right. So not that saying that anybody who does beer can design is an expert in it, because we're all learning and it's all subjective in a sense, because that's what art is. There's not a definitive rule. There is some definitive rules in art, like unless you're trying to be funny, you don't use like Comic Sans and papyrus on your cans. But like
Yeah, don't
there
use
are
it other than ironically. Yes,
Yes,
correct.
exactly. And so like there are some rules in it, and there's some rules obviously with colors that go together and all that stuff. But in the truth of the matter is you could do whatever you want on a can, and as long as it looks good, like to you, like it's art. It's the same thing with a beer in a sense. I had a conversation yesterday. It was like, you know, there's doing some weird things with IPAs nowadays, but if it gets someone in the door to drink craft beer, then
Right.
do what you want. Like it doesn't really matter. Like if the back and forth on milkshake IPAs, whether or not you should add lactose to beer and all that stuff, it's like, but if someone drinks it who doesn't normally drink beer, drinks this beer and then ends up drinking a regular, New England style IPA or West Coast IPA or whatever, then that's a good thing. Like, doesn't
Mhm.
matter. You don't have to make everybody happy. It's the same thing with the can design. If it gets someone, and the whole battle back and forth, and something that we've done, something that Mast is pretty good at, is the borderline intellectual property is a big thing in the beer industry with can designs, and that's actually a collab with Orno Brewing Company. And but
That
it's
is
the
funny.
idea, it's like if it gets people to pick the can up and buy the can, then like I said, but it's a borderline. There's something that Mass Landing and you have been really good at with pushing that envelope. But then there's other breweries where I've seen on like the intellect. What's the web the Instagram?
Intellectual pooperty.
Yes, that you see as someone who like literally put a Ninja Turtle on a can.
Right.
And it's like, okay,
Right.
that at that point, it's like, unless you were to have some fun with it and make it look like Parker's face, and that
Right.
kind of thing, it's that aspect of literally putting something on a can sometimes gets me, and that's where I draw the line. Otherwise,
Mhm.
have fun with it. I mean, this is technically the font; it's a ripoff of the Simpsons font.
Okay. Oh,
And
that's why
so,
it looks so familiar.
yeah, and so there's that. The splash behind it is not the actual Nickelodeon one, but it's a play on the Nickelodeon
Close.
one.
Yeah.
And so, like, the idea that yes, this is supposed to look like the 1990s era Nickelodeon, but it's not like I didn't put Nickelodeon on the front of the can. Like, you didn't call the can Nickelodeon.
Right. This too. Like this doesn't have a
Yeah.
certain blue hedgehog that
Mhm.
likes rings on it, but it has almost everything else in the similar fonts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which we actually, I think we made it onto that website for this one. But yeah, we actually have something fun planned for this in the future, so we'll be in touch on that.
And that's the thing. It's like but you push the envelope. I think that's the whole
Right.
point behind
Yeah.
it. Is push the envelope, but don't actually like open the envelope and like take it. Like at some point, and especially I mentioned the Ninja Turtles one because I am really good friends with Ben Bishop, who draws the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,
Yep.
and then the guy who created Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is from Maine,
Mhm.
Kevin Eastman. So it's like the idea that
Grew
just
up in
taking
Westbrook.
what they have done, yes, and taking what they have done and their history of it and being like, oh, I'm going to try to sell beer by putting them on the front of the can.
Right.
That's where the line I think is drawn. The same thing with the company in Detroit who put Barry Sanders from the football game, the old Nintendo football game.
Yeah. Oh,
They
Tecmo.
basically,
Or yeah. Oh.
yeah, they put him on the front of the can. Barry Sanders was like, hey man, like that's obviously me. Like,
Well, we did with Vitamin C. We did the Stamos on drums,
yeah,
and I did, and that's where, I mean, now that we're on the topic, I don't think anyone knows exactly where that line is.
Mhm.
Where we actually did a collaboration with Night Shift, and there was a illustration of Bob Barker on it. It was a Happy Gilmore
Mhm.
theme, when he fights him, and they actually found out, his people or whoever, his attorney, found out about it, and they sent the cease and desist. It was before the beer came out, so they had to change the label and everything like that. But we did it with John Stamos's face, and I think he actually liked a couple comments and stuff like that. So it's like, I think in that situation, it's like, if it's done in a way, or if the person is fine with it, it's like
Yeah.
all their how comfortable they are with it. So
But I think, like I said, that the line is also like you have the right as a company to parody things. Like there's a parody line, like the same thing with
mhm,
songs and stuff like that, where you're allowed to get to the point where you parody something. So the Stamos on
right.
drums is almost, I think, would be fall in that parody category. It's the like calling a beer Budweiser and putting the
Right.
Budweiser logo all over it and stuff like that. It's like, well, no, you're trying to. That's different. I feel like paying homage and parodying is part of that below the line, and then
Mhm.
above the line, like going too far, is the one where you're basically just taking someone's creation and making it your own. I feel
Likeness.
like it's more,
Yeah.
it's like the likeness is different. It's more the idea of like, I don't know, artwork. Like you're making artwork and taking someone else's artwork. So if you took a picture of me and put it in a can, it's my likeness, but it's really just like, it's almost like a paying homage to someone. You're not,
Right.
you're just like, hey, we really like you. We want to put you on a can. We did the same thing with Jewel Runner was a beer we did, was a Saison we did. That was a play on the Run the Jewels.
Yeah.
But really, it was more of a ripoff of Blade Runner because the font was more realistic to Blade Runner. But it was really more of like we like Blade Runner, we like Run the Jewels, let's have this beer and do this thing. It wasn't trying to like steal from them in a sense. So it's like
you
that
at least
difference
put
on
some
it.
creativity into it and changed it. Yeah, no, and like that's with the In the Zone beer. Like one of the things that I felt good about was I recreated all the artwork pixel by pixel myself. So it wasn't like I just grabbed someone else's picture offline. I just used it. Images I was looking at. So yeah, I mean it's funny where that is such a large part of our industry and not really in a lot of other industries. It's a very weird thing to think about. Like, you're not in the food industry, you're not going around like people making, like intellectual property claims off of food or anything else. It's really a very beer specific or craft beer specific issue, if you will.
And it's not even an alcohol specific, like you mentioned. It's a craft beer specific. It's like, it's not even like you're seeing wines or ciders or mixed drink cocktails like trying to do this. It's really just a beer thing. But I feel like it's part of it is because there's not many people, not many industries that create so many new things. Like, when someone creates a candy bar and they create that candy bar and they're 900% into that candy bar, they're not going there and be like, okay, here's the candy bar. And then 2 weeks from now, there'll be another candy bar. But in the beer industry, it's like that aspect of you got to try to figure out a way to market this beer in a way that's going to grab attention of people. And part of it is, like I said, pushing that envelope. Plus, I think there's a lot of it that's like me. It's like, I have very big passions in things. And like, I would love to pay homage and respect. And that's what I'm doing on it. It's more, if I ever design a label that's like close to that borderline, it's because I love someone so much that I want to pay them respect by putting it on a can. And I feel like there's like I said, as long as you don't call it the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles beer and put Leonardo on the front of the can, I think that's the line. I think otherwise it's the Stamos on drums. It's like, oh, that's pretty funny. It's John Stamos as a drum. And you didn't use his picture. It's a rendering of him. It's a drawing of him.
I guess I drew it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I know. I agree. That's why I do a lot of like the retro video. I mean, I love retro video games. It's a huge part of, growing up and still today. Like, and so that's like one of the things that connect, and it makes it even more fun to like put the time into, the fact that, I get paid to like make labels like this is kind of like blows my mind every day. In all, not just the retro ones, just all together. I feel, I'm sure you feel the same way. Is very fortunate that like when people talk about dream jobs, I was like, well, talking about their dream job or what that would be. I'm like, oh, right here, got it. Like,
well, and I had that conversation with someone the other day. I was just having a conversation with one of my coworkers, and saying that like this is the like I can't never in my life have I ever gone, what's next? It's like this is the next, and it's like what's next at what I do. So like what's next for the thing? What's going? I mean, we're working. We did tubular, and then the next Way Life should be a next printed can for us. Like what's the next printed can for us? And that's where we're moving towards, or what's the next design for me, or whatever. So like there's that aspect of it, but there's not. To me, it's like I know where I'm hopefully know where I'm going to work 5 years from now because that's what I love what I do, and there's no reason for me to change it. And the fact that we work. Maybe someone who is someone who does like canning. I can understand them being like, okay, I want the next thing. I want to become a brewer. I want to, but with us, it's like we have a next thing is the next design. Like there's still something to look forward to. There's still like, okay, we sold out of those sweatshirts. What's the next design of sweatshirt we're going to make? Or, we're doing a collaboration. There is that aspect of look forward to something. And that's something about the art industry as a whole. But in beer, this is a lot more. And then you mentioned like, being super excited about like this job is the first time I saw my can in a store that wasn't an Orono Brewing Company shelf was still to the point where it had to pinch myself. I'm like, hundreds and hundreds of people, not thousands of people in the state are opening a can of beer that has my label on it. Like that's pretty freaking crazy. And it really sunk in when we went to New York City. And we did that event in New York City, not more recently. The first one I did back in May of 16. and I walked into a Blind Tiger, and on the wall was a poster I created for the event. So like it had
Yep.
our logo on there and Bissell's logo on there. Everybody was there, and I looked at it and I'm like, it's pretty funny to laugh. I'm gonna tell you, any of my people who went to art school, like for years to art school, I want to text them right now and be like, hey, by the way, is your art hanging in New York City? Mine is. And it's a poster for a beer event on a wall of a bar, but it's like in New York City. The people visiting New York City went to Blind Tiger, looked up on the wall, and saw artwork that I had created. It wasn't my favorite thing in the world, but it was something, and it was just cool to think about that now. Our beer is in France. There's a company that has beer in France. It's not my can. It's the can before I started doing the cans, the tubular. But eventually, one of my cans could end up in France. Like it's like we went to Iceland. It was in Iceland. And you go to like different places. It's fascinating to me that I'm able to work in an industry that I get to work with cool people, yourself included, and create cool beer, but also have my designs be now pretty much nationwide. I mean, Tavor has our beer, so anybody in the country really has it legal to ship to can buy my beer or buy my label.
Yep. I find it one of the like I agree completely with everything you just said, how like awesome. And then it, as you start to have more and more out there, it gets a little bit more like you get used to it a little bit more. But the one thing that for me with can designs, it's like if you have, say you're doing a painting and you have a painting and you get it so it's perfect and then it's up on the wall and and you see it and people look at it. With us, and especially with the industry having like we're turning out sometimes 4 new beers a week, and that means 4 new label designs. And like the second we post that on social media, like the can label, and people are like, cool label, it's like, it's for me, it's like I honestly like get sick to my stomach right before I hit that post, like being like, are people gonna like it? Are they gonna get it? Are they, and then it's like that instant gratification where, the world that we live in, it's, from someone, a painter, you might never know how someone felt about but you immediately do. And it is definitely like one of the coolest and scariest feelings. Like you're kind of like throwing yourself out there immediately on the internet, but it's also fun to have that many people see your stuff. Like, and my, I never really thought that I would be doing that on a daily or weekly basis, turning out new pieces of artwork. If you really at the its most like at the most, I don't know, standard form.
Yeah. And the funny thing about it is, like we mentioned, we work in the beer industry. We don't work in the design industry. We're designers in beer industry. But the truth, we want the best thing to come out of that can is what's in the can. Like that's the whole point. We work for a brewery, so the beer itself should be the best product out there. However, in the industry we work in now, compared to years and years and years ago, and actually probably forever though, because the design's not what I hate to say. Our designs sell cans, but my point is, someone makes a decision prior to trying the beer at a package store, your local package store, based on the label first. They look at the label, it draws them in, and then they maybe look at the style in the ABV, what's in it, who makes it. But it's like what first draws most people in is what the way the label looks. And so when you post something on your Instagram and Weekend Plans can, if someone hasn't tried Weekend Plans yet, the first thing that's going to draw them in is the design of the can. And then you have to sell them on cracking the can open and trying the beer. So people make judgments even before they try the beer based on what it looks like. So whether it's positive
if people
or
are
negative,
judging the book by the cover.
And that's something you have to deal with. And that's something that the pressure does get on. But you're also probably in agreement with me. The second you release a can too, you're like, oh, I could have done that different. Or I could have done this different.
Totally.
And then you're like crap, because there's certain things where people fall in love with it and you're like, there's definitely designs that I've done that are like 2 or 3 years old that someone's like, okay, we're gonna make that beer again. And I'm like, oh, can I change the label? Like, no, people love the label. I'm like, I don't love the label at all. I loved it when I finished it. By now it's like, it's passe, it's over. I want something new.
And I've had that exact same conversation. Yep. It's and that's actually when we transferred on that note, when we transferred our label designs over to the new layout, that actually gave me a chance to kind of have a second pass at some labels. Some simplified, some we altered. So, I really like how it transferred into the new layout. Some I think I've I think it's good, but I'm like wondering if it could have been better or something like that. And luckily for some of our beers that don't come around a lot, like I'm granted that, like that privilege to be able to tweak it slowly, where, we with labels, once we go through it, we can make small changes and stuff. And a lot of times people won't see it, but we kind of like back to that candy bar analogy, like, we're once you make the candy bar, that's it. Like, we're allowed to, continually kind of advance and change and tweak if we want to.
And it's a benefit, and that's one of the benefits of having printed or labeled cans. So if anybody doesn't know, a labeled cans, you get these blank silvers that come in, and we print thousands of labels depending on the what beer we're doing, and it gets labeled after the beer's in the can. And so the benefit of a labeled can is that if you did do something that you thought, oh, I want to tweak this, whatever, the next time you order those labels, you can just quickly tweak it and do whatever. A printed can is a whole other process that goes into it. It takes weeks and weeks and weeks, and then it takes 8 to 10 weeks to actually get it. Most of our label companies are 10 to 14 business days getting us labels, so we can make those tweaks and get it in for the next brew if you brewed it immediately afterwards.
And you also don't have to buy a full truckload either.
And so, like, there is, like I said, the reason we do tubular at Owner Brewing Company on printed labels is we do go through that much beer of that one thing, and it just made sense for us, and so on. But also, we don't have, even if we sold that much cans of everything, no one in Maine has that much storage to store all those cans, those empty cans.
Right.
You want to get a truckload of blank cans that you can make 15 beers out of,
and divvy up. Yeah.
And so that's one of the things about can labels that makes it very beneficial. There's a lot more that goes into ordering on time and getting quantity discounts and all that stuff, but we don't want to get into that because that's just annoying and boring. But like, it is cool, like, in that aspect of it, that if I felt like I wanted to tweak a color of something really quickly because I didn't realize it was going to print that color, or I thought the text would look better lower or higher, or we want to add a hop to the beer, that a can that has a printed label is able to be changed really easily. So there is that aspect of nothing's final. That once you make a decision on a grand design, a lot of times Parker and I have to like say that's the design, because if you're trying to sell the brand, you have to basically try to convince people that's the same beer. But there are small things that you could change with the printed or with a can label. They're also removable, which is cool because they come stickers.
Right.
But but it's one of those things. I mean, and I've made mistakes on labels. I won't lie. I mean, I've actually, at the very beginning of doing cans, is I got hired at Owner Brewing Company to be a manager, but also to be a designer, but we hadn't done cans at that time. So I wasn't working on cans originally. I was just working on promotional posters and things like that. Like one of the first cans I did, the 2 cans that came out had the same UPC. Because I just didn't think about the aspect of changing it. And sometimes you get lucky, it's the same price point. But it happened to be like a Kolsch, which was like a $14 4-pack, and a double IPA, which was like a $17 4-pack. So it did not work out that way. And so there is those times where I've made those mistakes, and non-printed cans. Obviously, if it was a printed can, we probably would have looked way closer at the edit. But,
well, I mean, to your defense, like that's the situation now is like when you're releasing 4 different labels at a time, and or 4 different beers. And you're designing a label and sending the print within a couple of days, sometimes a day. Those are the things. I so far I have 2 typos on labels, and I'm not proud of it, but I will own it as well. And they haunt me daily. And like I pride myself in not making many mistakes, but when I do, it's literally the worst.
It is. And it's like, it's certain things you can get by. There's certain things that if you accidentally, missed a period on the end of something, or there's things that you don't have to worry about. Like at the bottom of our cans now, it has this on the front. It says 8.5% alcohol by volume. If I forgot at the very end of that volume a period, no one's gonna bring me out to slaughter for it. But if you misspell a word, or the UPC thing, like I mentioned, that is a big, not big, like we got around it. Obviously, it didn't close Owner Brewing Company, but it's like, those are things that you kick yourself for forever. I have written dry hopped hyphenated on one in a description and forgot to do it in another. Those are things that most people wouldn't even realize. But again, as a designer, as someone who tries to pride themselves on perfection, it becomes an issue, because you want to make sure everything looks the same and does that. So, and it usually is like Abe will be like, hey, by the way, you didn't put dry hop hyphenated on this can. And I'm always like, for 15 minutes, I'm sitting at my desk like, God damn it. Okay, man. I'm like, yeah, I just hate doing this. I hate screwing up.
Oh,
like, don't worry
it
about it.
ruins
I'm
your
like,
day.
no. Yes.
It does. It really does. And yeah, you'll hear me in the like other room just swearing. But no, it's funny you said that about the UPC. And we had a situation like that where I put the wrong, or we change price points or whatever on a Telltale variation. And so we had the wrong UPC on a lot of cans, and it was already out in market. So we had to print out, I had to print out on sheets little new UPC codes, and then go around and we like our distributor helped us out, but then I went in-house, sat there for like 5 days, like on my lunch break going through, and I like, knowing that it involved me, and I was part of the mistake, I went and did every single one. And that's how you learn to check UPCs the hard way.
And it will give benefit to our printing companies. I don't know, who are you guys using now for labels?
We use a couple. We use Blue Label up in Ohio, as well as In Touch in Massachusetts.
And we've been using we've been using Blue Label for a while. Majority of ours have been with Amherst Label in New Hampshire. And to give them credit, they do what they're supposed to do. So like to give our printing companies the credit on that, they're not looking for changes to UPCs. Like they're not, they deal with thousands of people's labels, in a day. The UPC is our responsibility as a brewery. So when we look at it and they send us proofs, a lot of time we're like, oh, why would the UPC have any issues? You're looking for other issues that potentially could be a problem. And then now it's to the point where I'm like, 3 digits. I always remember the last 3 digits of the UPC because they're usually different. And I'm like, okay, 906, that's right. Cool, move on. And that's the aspect of it. And when you give your label to someone else from Mast Landing to look at your label, they're not looking at the UPC. So when it comes down to a UPC issue, like I mentioned for me and you mentioned yours, it's really on us. Like you and I as the UPC, like we have to be on top of those UPCs. And then it becomes an issue registering the beer for returns and all that stuff too. But like that's a other topic to talk about. But
the least interesting thing we could talk about right now.
So let's talk about UPC return or a bottle return
redemption.
But yeah, so not to spend forever on this, but like I was talking about can design. I just think, where do you think this is a future? Like what we're doing now is going to continue on forever. I had a discussion with Sean Sullivan of the Maine Brewers Guild about the future of beer can design. And we had mentioned someone like one of the greatest breweries in the state of Maine, one of the greatest breweries that I've ever had was Maine Beer Company. And they have a very simple, very clean beer design. That's a beer label design. That's just what they do. That's there. I mean, if you go into their tasting room, that beer company comes from. If you want to go in there, you're like, oh, I've seen this beer company before because everything's white and it's just clean and crisp. And there's something about it that does it for them. But that's not the future, I don't think. I think the future still lies within this unique can designs. And because of the ever-growing industry of craft beer and shelf space being smaller, you need to stick out. Do you see that too? Is that something that you see as like the uniqueness of cans continuing on?
I do. And I think that for some a brewery like Maine Beer Company, I think if it works for your brand and it's working, and I think that's breweries that kind of were in existence before I would say the craft beer boom, that they are able to get away with a little bit different rules. But moving forward, I think that I don't think it'll be completely necessary, but I think the future is, design and can design will be even more important. But also I think that there's going to be a shift where like Orono Brewing Company and Mast Landing, where at first I started out and like every label looked completely different. It was like this, that, they're all their kind of own separate things. I think there will be, where there's more beers being distributed and more beers on shelves, and your beers are together, some sort of unifying. I think that the unity between labels and the connection between different beers from one certain brewery on the shelf is going to become more important, and fueling our decision to kind of do what we did. And you guys have
Yep.
your logo,
Yep.
and then like the layout. So I think that's where it's going to be more important. But I do think that with like I said, if it works for your brand, and like somewhere like Hill Farmstead, they're able to get, they have a very simple and but when you see a can, it's a Hill.
Yep.
So I think I think it's specific breweries are able to do it, but newer breweries opening and new labels and new cans, and beers, I think have to lean a little bit more heavily on design, to work alongside the beer. Like, you can have the best label in the world, they're the coolest design, but if you open up that beer and it tastes not not
Well,
great.
and we've all had that. You and I both
Right.
guarantee we've opened a can being like, this is the most badass can I've seen in my life. And then you open it, you're like, yeah, I'm glad it's empty now.
Exactly. Yep.
And so yes, the quality of the beer that's in the can has to match, if not exceed, the label. But yes, you're right. I do agree with you on that aspect, that it has to go that way. And really, what Parker and I are trying to say is we just want our jobs to continue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, really. It's funny though. Where before I was, full time with Mass Landing, I did design work for a couple other breweries, and it was fun, being able to kind of branch out and do different designs, and then but like I had to be very, very I had to be very thoughtful about my designs, because I didn't want the my my style to cross over.
Yeah.
There are people like the Kiever, who does Treehouse labels, as well as like Vitamin C, and like
Yeah.
and he does for a lot of other breweries too. He must have a very, very hard time like differentiating between the two, or all the different designs he does, and making sure that they look unique, but also that show his style. And I don't think I could do it.
It's cool because like so we're doing a collab. We haven't fully announced it yet, but we're doing a collab with Vitamin C. It's coming out. We brewed it already. The labels are in the mail. We're doing a collab with Vitamin C that we did basically the same beer. We're doing one out of our brewery, Be My Sunshine. They're doing Be My Sunshine out of their brewery. Same hop bill, same grain bill, same everything. Their yeast, their water, our yeast, our water. And we're releasing cases of it in Massachusetts as well. And so it's kind of cool but I was like, when I went to design the can, I was like, can I pay some homage to his labels and add that, he has like the Vitamin C, it's a lot more like hand drawn style, a little darker colors. And so I was like, let's go that route. And it's so funny because I did that and I sent him my label, and he was able to do his own version of my version
Oh,
of his
that's
label. So
cool.
it was like even a more direct. It was so cool. So when those cans come out and it's kind of cool next to each other, you'd be like, this is definitely his label and this is definitely my label, but there's like an homage to his label in it and stuff like that, which is pretty cool, which is awesome because the first 2 years of Warner Brewing Company's labels that I did completely on my computer. No other, I did everything on Illustrator and Photoshop. Whereas now I've got, my iPad Pro, which makes the world of a difference. So now I've been able to do like our new Van Life label has been a drawing. This label is a drawing. We're doing some cans for the summer, a beer that's going to take the place of Widowmaker. That's going to have 4 different can designs in the same 4-pack.
Cool.
And so that's most likely going to be hand drawn, but the ability to do it on an iPad is gone drastically, made my ability way better, because you can delete and what you do with 3 the hard way.
So that I drew it by hand and then had to digitize. But yeah, I have an iPad Pro too with and Procreate, and that, if I have to do any hand drawing, like, I mean, we also, Melissa, who works in our taste room, is an incredibly talented artist, and usually I just ask her to do it because she's much better than me. But yeah, no, it kind of goes along the lines of that too, is with where if sometimes knowing that like digital design or even a drawing isn't where, like, that's why I love being able to utilize photography too. I love photography, and Gene, our marketing director, is also a very talented photographer, and so we're able to like use that, and that's one thing too, where we have even though kind of going back to the the layout of our labels, as long as we keep that the same, we're able to do hand drawn, we're able to do digital, we're able to do photography, and it's such a fun thing to be able to be like, in whatever works. Or some days I'll start on a design that is, I think it's going to be a digital or an Illustrator, and then I'm just like, I'm like, bail, not working, and then plan B, and then plan B is awesome. Or like plan B is much better than plan A, and it took me failing on plan A to realize that. But yeah, it's so fun to be able to utilize technology, and like I don't even understand. Like obviously, craft beer wasn't like this, back before, having all this technology. But it must have been. I can see why there was only a couple beers like this, or people were releasing, because so much work had to go into it.
It's like this beer label with coffee, this beer label double. Like it's very simple. Just add the word double to the IPA instead of IPA. But yes, there's so many tools at our fingertips nowadays, and label company, the label companies now are even working with us and trying to introduce things. I mentioned the 4 labels on one can. Printing companies are able to put that in sequential order now, so that you can put 4 different labels. So the canning line goes through, it has the same liquid in all cans, but every 4th can is different, and so on and so forth. So there's so many more tools at our fingertips that makes it, I mean, our jobs aren't easy, but it makes our job easier. And
absolutely.
I definitely think that we haven't made in the shade for the careers that we have and the ability of what we're doing, for sure. And I'm looking forward to the future of it, because I just think this is going to ever grow. And I think one of those things that we're going to grow as a company to the point where I am the general manager of our tasting room and stuff like that, but I have someone working underneath me now that eventually will grow into my position, and in this position where I'm not going to have enough time to do other stuff. So there is that. Our brands are all growing now, that makes it so much easier for us to be able to spend the time on designing. And I can't wait to see everything. Photography is a huge thing. Abe has taken, I don't know if you've probably seen our Instagram now. Abe has bought in all the equipment now. He's done he's dove head first into photography, and he's been really proud about it, which is really cool.
I was wondering that. I thought you guys hired someone.
No, Abe. He's definitely, it's Abe, and he's actually really excited about it, and so on. So we're working together on a bunch of stuff, and there's more to just brewing beer in a brewery. And I'm glad you were able to come on and talk about that, because there is this, cans don't get out to the market until there's a label on them, and that's the benefit of what Parker and I have the ability to do, is to be able to put a face to the beer. If you think about it, like we actually put when you're drinking that beer, you put an image to that beer. You know what I mean?
Right. And we just try to do as much as we can to help out the liquid inside. Give it its best opportunity to be successful.
Our stamp of approval on it. And here's the deal: Parker and I design labels before the beer's made. 99.9% of the time, the label, like we have a beer, we have to design a label, at least come up with a concept of the label before the beer is actually even being brewed, in order to get it printed and sent to your facility. So a lot of times it's not like you're trying a beer and being like, oh, this tastes like the 90s. It's like we make a label and the beer goes with it. So, which is pretty cool. So
I do think we missed the mark not making that beer be bright neon green inside.
See, there you go.
Make it pour out like slime.
In the future.
In the future. Although I'm sure, we could have figured it out, but no, I agree. I bet Kevin McGlynn will not.
Yeah.
Our sales.
Yes.
VP of sales would not want the green beer.
No, and it's the same thing. It's also like putting that through the canning line is probably wouldn't be fun either. So.
Cleaning it afterwards. Yeah.
Exactly. So
you just have a bunch of brewers just with their heads down, like shaking their heads, like.
So we'll do that on the outside of the can, so the liquid can stay good in the can.
Exactly.
And we didn't touch on it a lot, and I want to wrap this up, but like it became a little bit more needed during the pandemic to have cans. So it was pretty cool to see this, because very little much about a beer went into kegs. Like we know that a lot of it went onto shelves or to go for pizza spots and other places that sold beer to go. So the cans came even more prevalent. And I think because of that, they're not going to go away. So it's like in Mast Landing, when bars start to open up a lot more, Mast Landing's going to put more beer in kegs, but they're also not, I don't think they're going to put less beer in cans. So it's like,
Correct.
That's the thing that got cool with this, is that there's more of a need for cans, which became more shelf space for people, or less shelf space for people, because there's more beer on the shelves. and makes our job a little bit harder, but gives us a goal to go towards to make even better looking cans to make sure that people could buy our beer and enjoy Mast Landing or a brewing company and others along the way too. So it's exciting.
Yeah.
The future's exciting. I think the future's exciting for beer labels. I think it's not going to go anywhere. I hope you agree.
I know. Yeah, that means if it does, I'm in trouble. No,
Yes.
I agree. No, and I actually like when you said about like the opportunity to be able to have 4 different labels. Like I've seen that, and like I've always thought about like something like that, but never really been able to like put it into motion. It's cool because a couple brewers I remember back in the day, that wasn't an option. Like putting like the 4 different, and they would do like a roll.
Yep.
I think it was what was it?
Good Fire
Good
did
Fire.
it.
I think CMYK. They literally had to can each one, or it looked like they were labeling each one, and then they were combining
Yeah.
4, which that's a labor of love right there to make it happen. But you have to
A
applaud them for
one-off
that.
beer is pretty easy to do that. When you make a consistent beer, you're going to make it again. It's the
Right.
next time you're like, okay, we need to change what we do here. And we did that with
Yep.
the Zoo beer, and luckily Blue Label was able to put our labels in sequential
Yep.
order when we printed from them. These ones will be printed by Amherst likely, and they were said, yep, we can do it in sequential order. It's pretty cool. Makes it a lot easier. There is that thing with like shorts and all that stuff that becomes a little bit of a problem, but it's only a small like mishap
right.
because of that. But like
a couple
it's
cases
not,
at the end.
yeah, it's not a big problem. So it makes it easier, quite a quote, on the production team than it is harder for doing the, do 200 cans like this and then 200 cans like this and putting them all together afterwards.
I've also seen I've seen, just as we're on the topic of cool new things in the future. I think it was Dancing Gnome, and I've seen other brewers do it where it's got the label and then there's a little tab, and the label actually folds out for more information or more design or everything. I think theirs is, I think there's a map or something like that. But I thought that was such a cool idea where like, I'm sure it's a pretty expensive label, but like that, like what else is out there? Like, holographic or would be very cool.
Die cut.
Yeah.
People have done die cut. I know, like what Vermont is that Vermont Brewing Company or Burlington Brewing Company?
Foam does
yeah.
a
So
cool. I mean, in Burlington does that. Yeah. I mean, there's that's a very cool, like being able to not have a straight line at the top on the bottom is such, just like, it's a small thing, but it's another thing to help a beer stick out on the shelf, really.
So yeah, I mean, there's definitely, like I said, that's why I think it's not going anywhere. I think it's not just the design; it's the cutting, the printing, the labels. It's the way to do 4-packs in four different cans, or a case of beer that has 6 different 4-packs in it, or 16-ounce cans, 12-ounce cans. There's just so many options for us to do that makes it something that like there's no end in sight, which is pretty cool for me. Right. And then you add in, like I said, you don't just do can labels. There's photography involved. There's merchandise. All that stuff. We focused this episode on beer can design, but there's a lot more that goes into designers for breweries, which includes merchandise and posters for events and things that happen in the tasting room, and photography, social media, all that stuff that also goes into it. So at Mast Landing, right, is the official one.
Yeah.
And you have is it mastlandingbrewing.com or is it just mastlanding.com?
It's mastlandingbrewing.com. We actually funny story that we tried to register mastlanding.com like a day after a assisted living facility register it. We were one day late on that, so they have it.
Just a small little thing. I registered a beer or searched for a domain name not that long ago, and then I searched for it a day later, and because I searched for it, some sort of bot bought it, and then so I've had that happen before too.
Well, but yes, it's at Mast Landing for our Instagram, Twitter, all the good stuff, Facebook. That's
and then mastlandingbrewing.com. Buy some merch, buy some beer. You guys have the igloos right now?
Yeah, we have we got igloos. We got 9 heated igloos, filtered, sanitized between everybody. It's going awesome. We also have the Mainstay, our food truck / kitchen up and rolling. That's going awesome.
So if you live in the greater Portland area, 920 Westbrook, or 920 Main Street in Westbrook.
Yep.
Sweet.
920 Main Street in Westbrook. Yep. And yeah, come by. Go online. You can make reservations for the igloos right online. So
Oh,
you don't
that's
have
awesome.
to stand in line. Yeah, that's all through the website. So you can book with up to a month.
Pandemic has made us do so many cool things. I'm so excited. A lot of them are going to stay. There's some things that will go away, but I think it's a lot of cool things that will stay.
There are some good silver linings.
Yeah, yes, definitely cool. But and then so yeah, at Mast Landing on Instagram, great cool pictures and stuff like that. Parker, I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Oh, thank you. It was great talking to you,
Yeah.
Justin. This is great.
Yeah, it's awesome. So
I wish I had other things to talk about so I could come on again and talk about other stuff.
well, I think we could. What I thought would be kind of cool is to do someone like. I mean, you guys still using 320?
Yeah, yeah.
I think it'd be kind of cool if we did like get Seth on and a couple people who order merch from them and talk merch at some point too. So maybe that would be the future.
Oh, there you go. I'd love to talk about merch design. I'm not great at it.
Me either. So that's why we rely on Seth, right?
Yeah, we'll talk.
But I really appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Justin. I'll talk to you later.
See ya.